Good morning and welcome to the latest in my series of conversations. I've always been interested as part of my personal and professional development in the benefits that come about when we challenge ourselves or come out of our comfort zone. From this interest, my business Noodle was born. I get a great sense of pride seeing how people grow and develop when they challenge themselves to something they've never tried before or thought they could do. I've been developing this to help people in their working life, and particularly leadership roles, to see how they can stretch their horizons and become more resilient. Never was there a time that tested our resilience more than with COVID-19. I've been delivering a series of discussions and webinars with people I admire for the skills and techniques they use to develop people, looking at how some of the tools they use can be transferred into our everyday lives to improve ourselves. Through my coaching pursuits, I'm particularly interested in understanding how we can develop ourselves to be the best we can be. And with that in mind, today I'm speaking to Ellie Holly. Ellie is a medical herbalist and nutritional therapist. Ellie completed her 4-year herbal medicine degree back in 2000 and has been seeing patients in private practice ever since. She's passionate about educating and empowering people so they can regain their health and fully enjoy life again. Nutrition is a big part of her practice. Ellie now teaches nutrition both at degree level at Hartwood Education and at City Lit in central London. I first started working with Ellie over 4 years ago in preparation for my Andes cycling challenge, and she's continued to support me through the hormonal challenges my body faces during perimenopause. This is an area which really interests me, not only from my own perspective, but for the women I coach. Today I'll be talking to her about how we can support our bodies during these hormonal changes through good nutrition and herbal support. This is an extensive subject, so we will be able to just briefly cover some of these areas, but I know Ellie will also be telling us about some specialist webinars she's going to be delivering on this subject too. Good morning, Ellie. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Denise.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So if we can just kick things off with challenge as a theme, and as I know myself only too well, the years leading up to menopause can bring all sorts of hormonal changes. Can you give us a bit of an overview of the types of challenges the body's facing during this time?
So menopause, it means when your periods have completely stopped and you're not getting any more ever again. And perimenopause is the time leading up to that complete cessation of menstruation. So for some women, that can be feel like a relatively short transition that might only take a year or two. But for other women, that perimenopausal period can go on for up to a decade, and during that time your sex hormones, particularly progesterone and estrogen, are really dropping, and then you've got other hormones coming in trying to counter that deficit with more follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, desperately trying to get the ovaries to still ovulate. So you've got a lot of chemical imbalance going on in the body, and that can throw up all sorts of different symptoms for different women. So for some women it may be barely noticeable, but for others it can be a really challenging period.
Yeah, it certainly can be. I think you've given a good overview there of the sort of some of the details of what's going on in the body. Can you tell us what other stresses the body is under, say, for example, cognitive function?
Well, I think what's going on, if you imagine at the beginning of your monthly cycle and day 1 and 2 of your bleed, your estrogen levels are really, really low, and then your estrogen levels rise and go up throughout the rest of the menstrual cycle. And then if you're still ovulating, then around the middle of your cycle, maybe day 14, if an ovary releases an egg, then what's left behind there is the corpus luteum, and that is what actually produces progesterone and gives you the progesterone throughout the second half, the last, say, 14 days of your cycle. And obviously, if you're having cycles where you're still having regular periods, but you're not ovulating because you've run out of eggs, or your egg quality is quite low because you're in your late 30s or your 40s, then you're not getting that release of progesterone. And progesterone has a really powerful effect on brain chemistry, and this is a really exciting emerging area because we're just discovering more and more all the time. But progesterone affects dopamine levels and dopamine is a brain chemical involved in motivation and drive and happiness. Serotonin, which really influences your mood, your sleep patterns, your sex drive, and other neurotransmitters that help to keep you calm and relaxed and not feeling anxious. And when you've got this dramatic drop in progesterone because you're having cycles where you're not ovulating, and then added on to that, your estrogen levels are nowhere near as high as they were when you were in your earlier years, you know, that is massively impacting on, you know, not just mood and feelings of well-being, but also memory and concentration. And people so often talk about brain fog, and that's really a good description of what's going on for a lot of women.
That's really interesting. I think, as you said, it's an exciting area that a lot more is being looked into about it. It is great to see this, it's being spoken about a lot more, because I think there's so much that, you know, you've explained there that I think lots of people are totally unaware of. You know, they suddenly hit this period in their life and think, what is going on? So that's a really good overview, and it kind of puts your mind at ease that you're not going slightly mad. And what about how these changes are affecting the way our digestive system works and how we metabolize food?
I think it's less the menopause and the perimenopause per se with digestion, as opposed to generally getting older. And they talk in a lot of cultures about digestive fire, you know, and that being your capacity to kind of digest and break down the nutrients in food and get them into the body, and lack of digestive fire as one gets older. And if you look at it from kind of a sciencey medical point of view, that really translates quite well. I mean, this is just one example, your stomach acid levels. So you want your stomach to be this highly acidic environment with a very, very low pH, so that you can switch on your protein digesting enzymes, so that you can separate the minerals out from your food so that you can absorb them further down the digestive tract. So that's things like zinc and magnesium and calcium, and also so that you can get B12 well absorbed further down the digestive tract. And your stomach acid levels do decrease with age. And if your stomach acid levels are lower, then your ability to do all of those really important digestive and absorptive roles is compromised. And it can become a bit of a catch-22, because you need zinc, for example, to produce stomach acid. If your stomach acid levels are low, then you're not going to be able to separate the zinc off efficiently from the food, and that's going to further compromise your ability to produce stomach acid. And you know, you can even see this in quite obvious terms in terms of your body not being able to digest foods as easily as when you were younger, you know, feeling really bloated, feeling overfull, feeling like food's getting stuck after heavier meals or fattier meals, or even meals that have got larger portions of protein in, or just bigger meals.
That's really interesting. And again, something I wasn't really aware of. I know that, you know, when I speak to my parents and they say, you know, how they're, you know, they can eat smaller meals and how their digestion has changed. And I always thought, really, you know, how does that happen? So that's a really good insight into the biology of what's going on. Thank you. If we look at the sort of area of resilience, I'm keen to understand more about how we can build and maintain our body's resilience through the use of good nutrition during these hormonal changes. So what are the key considerations we should be looking at during this phase of our lives in terms of nutrition?
I think what's really important to remember is actually how little all of us eat compared to what a woman would have been eating 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, most women would have been doing a huge amount of physical labor in the home, you know, scrubbing floors, hand washing clothes, you know, walking everywhere. And so their calorie needs were much, much higher. So they were eating much bigger volumes of food. Whereas now, if you think about, most women are in quite sedentary jobs, even if they're going to the gym 3 times a week, a lot of their day is spent sitting, maybe they're trying to manage their weight. And that means that the amount of food they're consuming is really small compared to what it would have been in the past. And that means you've got a much smaller window of opportunity to get in all of the vitamins and the minerals and the essential fatty acids that you need from your diet. So diet quality becomes so much more important, and really you've got to see every meal and snack as an opportunity to nourish your body and to bring in what it needs nutritionally. I would say around the time of perimenopause, eating lots of plant foods is very important, because in lots of plant foods you've got chemicals called phytoestrogens, and phytoestrogens are molecules within the plants that look very, very similar to the estrogen that we produce in the body. And when we eat those foods, those phytoestrogens get into the bloodstream, they circulate, and they actually latch on to your estrogen receptor sites, and they will then exert a mild estrogenic effect within the body. And those estrogen receptor sites, a lot of them are going to be empty because you yourself are producing less estrogen. You're not producing enough to fill all of those sites. So if the plants can come in and give you a little bit of a boost, that's going to take off some of the harsh edges of those kind of common menopausal symptoms. So phytoestrogen rich foods are things like vegetables like carrots and parsley, anything from the umbelliferae family, sweet potatoes, yams, nuts, seeds, flax seeds and pecans are both particularly high in phytoestrogens, and beans and pulses as well. And the other consideration I would say is protein, and making sure that you're taking in enough protein. You're making your body every day. You know, your cells are turning over, your skin cells, your bone cells, your muscle cells, your heart cells are all being replaced on a day-by-day basis. And so if you're only taking in borderline just about enough protein, or slightly under your requirements for protein, then your body's going to concentrate on repairing your heart, your kidney, your key tissues. It's not going to concentrate on things like bone and collagen, and your bones are 35% protein. So if you want to not get osteoporosis, not get arthritis as you age, you have to take in enough protein to manufacture that bone. And collagen is the connective tissue that stops us getting wrinkles, that makes up our tendons, our ligaments, you know, all the kind of joining tissues within the body. And that is made of protein. And you know, if you don't want to be wrinkly, you've got to eat enough protein. And quite often women who are on low fat diets end up being on low protein diets as well, because protein and fat often come together naturally in lots of foods.
That's a good insight. So you mentioned a lot about the plant-rich foods there, but what is your take on sort of vegan diets versus animal protein and so on?
I think vegan diets can work really well. It depends on the individual person. I think if you're following a vegan diet, then you do need to work harder to hit those protein targets. I think if you're following an omnivore diet, it's relatively easy. You don't need to put a huge amount of thought in to hit a safe and comfortable protein intake. But if you're vegan, you may well need to top up with something like a vegan protein powder, just to give some of your meals an extra boost. And that doesn't mean that you have to start drinking shakes. It can mean adding some protein powder into, say, soups that haven't got any beans and pulses in, to give it a decent protein content, or even into things like curries or stews and casseroles, that kind of thing. Nuts and seeds become incredibly important when you're on a vegan diet. Your plant foods are really good for providing antioxidants, vitamins and phytochemicals. Now, plants do have minerals in them, calcium and magnesium and zinc and iron and so on, but they're more difficult for the body to extract from the plants and get into the bloodstream. But nuts and seeds are really your best source of minerals if you're on a vegan diet. If you're on a non-vegan diet, you know, red meat and fish and eggs are really good sources of minerals. So I think if you've got a nut allergy and you're vegan, you're slightly up against it.
Well, right, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. Oh well, I feel okay with my steak once a week. Then I'm brilliant. So obviously, good nutrition is key at all stages of our lives. But are there things that we should start to adapt and think about in our late 30s and early 40s to prepare us for those hormonal changes ahead?
I think making sure that you've got, you know, really good intake of your vitamins and minerals is key. Beyond that, when your estrogen levels start to drop and you're moving into that perimenopause phase, maintaining a healthy weight and not becoming overweight often becomes more challenging. So I think making sure that your diet's as clean as possible, so taking all of all of the harmful things out of your diet. So for example, lots of us consume lots of vegetable oils, not because we're using lots of vegetable oil at home, but because we're buying processed foods that contain vegetable oils. So things like vegetable oil in a quiche, or in a pie, or in a ready-made curry that you've got from the shop, or anything that's fried. So example, if you're eating out, things like starters, calamari, spring rolls, anything, from an Indian or from a Chinese. And those vegetable oils, they are really cheap. They're damaged at the point of extraction from the plant, and they're very high in free radicals. Now, free radicals are highly reactive molecules that go around damaging the cells and the tissues of the body. So free radicals will accelerate the aging process, and they will also promote inflammation. And as you come up to that perimenopause, menopause time, you are up against it, because the hormonal changes that you're going through will be promoting inflammation. So you want to dampen that down as much as possible. Inflammation is really the major driver behind most chronic health conditions. So things like arthritis, cardiovascular disease, dementia, loss of cognitive function, more vulnerability to injury, all of those kinds of things. So I would say avoid the vegetable oils, with the exception of really good quality olive oil and extra virgin cold pressed coconut fat, and things like organic butter. They're probably your safest choices for cooking and eating.
That's good. You can see me probably go, when you said calamari, one of my personal favorites. So yeah, that's definitely answered my next question as well, is about things that we should look to avoid, and that sort of time of our lives. So that's been a good overview. Thank you. If we can sort of come on to, I'm obviously somebody who trains a lot for multi-sport events and also coach other people. And I'm interested in how we can continue to stay fit and healthy, performing at our best during perimenopause and menopause. Are there any key things to consider in terms of nutrition if we want to continue to train and compete during these changes that our body's going through?
I think if you're doing a lot of exercise, there's a few nutrients that become particularly important, and magnesium is one of them. So magnesium is a mineral that's involved in literally thousands of different chemical reactions in the body, and it's involved in muscle relaxation, it's involved in cardiovascular health, managing your blood pressure. It's also good for calming anxiety. It's important for energy production, which is why athletes need more magnesium, because obviously the mitochondria, the energy producing units within their cells, are working much harder because they're doing that extra bit of exercise. So that might be something that an athlete might want to consider supplementing with. The recommended daily amounts for magnesium is 300 to 400 milligrams a day. That's quite difficult to get through your diet. I mean, magnesium is found in things like avocados, fish, seafood, red meat, nuts and seeds. If you're buying magnesium as a supplement, magnesium citrate is the most easily absorbed form, and it's probably best to take it away from other food and supplements to get maximum absorption. Bedtime is a good time. And if you're having problems with sleep as well around the menopause, magnesium is a nice relaxing mineral to take at bedtime. So lots of reasons to think about it.
Good to know. And I've been following your advice to take magnesium. I think it definitely is beneficial. So if we can go on to the area of herbal medicine, this is obviously a key area of interest and a specialism for you. And I've benefited greatly from the support of herbal medicine over the past few years. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the use of herbal medicine can complement good nutrition during these changing hormonal phases? How do the herbal medicines you prescribe, for example, differ from the over-the-counter ones?
So herbal medicines can help in all sorts of ways, and herbal medicines and food, it's very much a transition. Where does something stop being food and start being a medicine? Examples like ginger and garlic and so on. Different plants have got all sorts of different properties. So many herbal medicines are phytoestrogenic. So doing that similar thing that I talked about with phytoestrogenic foods in terms of being able to lock onto empty estrogen receptor sites and give your estrogen levels a bit of a boost. You've also got herbal medicines that are gentle hormone regulators, so that they can just nudge your sex hormones in the right direction to get things onto more of an even keel. And that can be really helpful if you're getting a lot of worsening sort of PMS type symptoms, mood swings, irritability, breast tenderness, fluid retention around your menstrual cycle. And also herbal medicines can really support the nervous system. So you've got herbs that can have an antidepressant action. So for example, St. John's wort is an incredibly well-researched herb. There've been double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials showing that it is as effective for mild to moderate depression as the standard SSRI type antidepressants like sertraline. And then there's other herbs that are relaxing, that can help if you're getting a lot of anxiety, can help if you're getting sleep problems. And then there are adaptogen herbs, and these are tonic herbs that help to bring the body back into balance and normalize function. And these are really helpful around the time of the menopause. So you've got things like ashwagandha, which is an Indian herb that's gently relaxing, very, very good if you're burnt out, suffering from long-term stress and exhaustion. It's mildly estrogenic, so it's really specific for the menopause. Or you've got more stimulating adaptogen herbs like Siberian ginseng, that might be more appropriate if you're quite exhausted, but you have to keep going. You know, you can't take a break from your demanding job or your home life right now. And the nice thing about herbal medicines is that they work together and they complement each other. So obviously, if you come and see a professional herbalist like myself, I work with tinctures, the concentrated liquid extracts of herbs, and I'll mix 4 to 6 different plant tinctures together into one bottle, so you've got an individually tailored medicine specifically to suit your needs. But if you're buying over the counter, don't be nervous about trying 2 or even 3 different herbal remedies at the same time. They won't counteract each other, they'll actually be complementary. So when you're buying over the counter, you can buy tinctures, which are the liquid extracts of herbs, but you can also buy tablets or capsules. I think the main reason people sometimes say over-the-counter remedies are not effective is because the dosage recommendations are too low or the quality of the product is not good enough. There's a few things you can look at. Some herbal remedies have got the THR symbol on the back, and that is really found on the much bigger companies, and that's a sign that that particular product has undergone quality control testing. The other thing to look for is the German brands. In Germany, testing on herbal medicine is much, much more rigorous. So the German products that are on sale over here, I assume, are just overspill from their domestic market. So they're likely to be of a much higher standard than something that's coming from much further afield and outside of Europe and so on.
Ah, that's good. That's good to know. I didn't know those 2 things about, especially saying the THR and the specific brands, because I think sometimes people give over-the-counter remedies a bit of a bad press. But you say, I mean, it's like anything, not all things are equal, are they, in this sort of area? Thank you. I think it's been really, I know it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but it's been really highly insightful. And before we come on to the sort of fun bit at the end, I wonder if we could just sort of round up with, if you had a top tip for us to leave us with today, out of all the wonderful advice you've given us, what would it be?
So my top tip would be to make sure that half your plate is vegetables or salad at every meal, so that, you know, 5 a day should be a bad day, not your kind of extremely good day. And not to be nervous about trying over-the-counter remedies if you're getting perimenopausal symptoms. Give things a go and take them at the proper dosage. And phone a herbalist. If you know, most herbalists, if someone phones me up and just wants a quick bit of advice over the phone about what they should buy, you know, phone up and check, and then go out and help yourself.
Oh, yeah, but they really shouldn't be buying over the counter. They should be going to you, I would say. experience. Thank you so much, Ellie. So we're there. Yeah, the little fun ending I ask everyone that I interview is, what would you like to leave us with as a feel-good song? Maybe one that resonates with you. Might be something to do with strength or positivity. And I'm not going to ask you to sing it.
Maybe Black Eyed Peas, I've Got a Feeling, just because it's such a positive, uplifting song.
I love it. Good choice. And also a little bit of a food reference in there with the title of the band. So nice one. This has been a bit of an overview of this very big subject. And I know you've got a couple of webinars coming up shortly. There'll be information about your website on a slide following this interview, so people can follow you and find out more about you. But I believe you've got the dates of those webinars at the moment as well.
Yes, I'm doing a webinar specifically on perimenopause and menopause, and that's on Thursday, the 23rd of September at 7:30. It's an hour and a half. And I'm actually going to do one on postnatal recovery on the 21st of October. That's another Thursday evening. And a little bit closer to Christmas, there'll be one on PMS and period problems.
Perfect. Are those all online, or are they any of them in person, or are we still in the virtual world?
They are going to be live webinars, so they will be online, but there'll be half an hour given over to questions and answers at the end. And I'm going to ask everyone at the beginning if there's anything they particularly want to know about. So I'm really hoping that attending the webinar is going to give people all the information that they need to feel empowered to overhaul their diet and go out and buy perhaps some supplements or some herbal medicines, which are going to help them start feeling better and really take control of their perimenopause and their life.
Perfect. It's let's leave it on that positive note, because it's a positive time of change. And thank you again for not only today, but for your ongoing support. Thanks, Ellie.
It's my pleasure.